الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقال الملك إني أرى 7 بقرات سمان يأكلهن 7 عجاف و7 سنبلات خضر وأخرى يابسات يا أيها الملأ أفتوني في رؤياي إن كنتم للرؤيا تعبرون قالوا أضغاث أحلام وما نحن بتأويل الأحلام بعالمين وقال الذي نجا منهما وادكر بعد أمة أنا أنبئكم بتأويله فأرسلون يوسف أيها الصديق وافتنا في 7 بقرات سمان يأكلهن 7 عجاف و7 سنبلات خضر وأخرى يابسات لعلي أرجع إلى الناس لعلهم يعلمون صدق الله العظيم. Respected brothers and my dear young friends, from this ayat we start the 6th ruku of Surah Yusuf, and last week we finished off on the subject where Yusuf was interpreted the dreams, and the 2 inmates were taken out of jail. One was restored and reinstated into his position as the king's cupbearer, giving drink to the king, and the other was hanged. And whilst the cupbearer, the one that Yusuf knew was going to survive and is going to stay alive, Yusuf mentioned to him that if you get a moment with the king and you are alone, then make mention of me. That was where we finished off last week. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts to mention regarding the king of the time. And he says, وَقَالَ الْمَلِكُ, and the king said, إِنِّي أَرَى. So he said to his ministers that إِنِّي أَرَى 7 بَقَرَاتٍ, that I see, meaning in a dream, sab'a means 7. Baqarat is a plural of cows. And siman means fat. I see 7 fat cows. يَأْكُلُهُنَّ, they are being eaten by 7 ijaf, 7 thin cows. وَسَبْعَ سُنْبُلَاتٍ, and I see 7 green ears of corn. And وَأُخْرَى يَابِسَاتٍ, so meaning they are fresh. وَأُخْرَى يَابِسَاتٍ, and others are dry. يَا أَيُّهَا الْمَلَأُ, O my ministers, أَفْتُونِي فِي رُؤْيَايَ, tell me regarding my dream. إِن كُنْتُمْ لِلرُّؤْيَا تَعْبُرُونَ, if you are indeed able to interpret dreams. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes mention of the dream that the king saw. And from here, the days and the trials of Yusuf are coming to an end. And a new chapter and a new episode in his life is starting, where he is reinstated, he is given respect, he gets a status by the king, and his difficult life starts to become easy now. Allama Kushay rahmatullahi mentions that the beginning of the trials of Yusuf started with a dream. The dream he saw right at the beginning, that Ya Abi inni ra'aytu ahada ashara kawkaba wa shams wal qamar, that I saw 11 stars, the sun and the moon prostrating before me. So that was a dream he saw. Allama Kushairi says that he saw that dream. The dream was meant to be kept a secret, somehow got disclosed, and as soon as the dream got disclosed, the brothers started to plot, and one after the other, a string of difficulties and hardships enveloped Yusuf until he went into jail for approximately 12 years. Some ulama say 14 years. And the Allama Kushairi goes on to say that the second episode of his life, where he is given honor, where his difficult life becomes easy, where the hardships go, starts with also a dream. And he starts with the dream of the king. That he sees a dream And when he sees the dream, he is anxious, he is frustrated, but nobody in the whole palace, no minister can give him comfort, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destined that the only person to relieve him from this anxiety would be Yusuf alayhi salam. And this was the beginning of his next episode. And under this ayat, Allama Shabbir Uthmani rahmatullahi was a great scholar of the subcontinent. He mentions that if you look in this ayat, we will realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works in a very mysterious way. And how things happen and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has planned always occurs, but it is well beyond our minds. We don't even understand what's going on behind the scenes. We might be in some situation, but in reality, that situation is gearing us up for something better. We might be feeling some hardship, but in reality, this hardship is going to lead to some bliss for us. And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, Allah latifun bi ibadi. Allah is very compassionate, very merciful. And from there we can derive a lesson as well. That sometimes we go through a difficult phase in our life. We go through some crisis, whether it's a financial crisis, whether it's a marriage problem, whether it's stress, whether it's friend related, family related. Then as believers, we have to understand that there is always light at the end of the tunnel. You will never stay in a stressed life. You will never stay in a difficult life. We can see from Yusuf's story that the difficulty was there, the hardship was there, but they were for a limited time. No human will go through a life just filled with difficulties. There is always light at the end of the tunnel, because living a life of permanent difficulty is only Jahannam. Jahannam is only the place where difficulty will remain forever and ever. So when we fall into such difficulties, what should we do? Number one, we should understand that whatever befalls us, whatever comes our way, whatever trial comes our way, وَنَبْلُوكُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ فِتْنَةً, it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is testing us. And it comes in a hadith that the more closer you are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more He will test you. So if you are being tested, then count yourself lucky. Inshallah, this should be a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes you. He loves you. That's why He's testing you, to make sure you stay firm on His deen. And we should be content, and we should be satisfied with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And number two, we should know that whenever we are in a difficult circumstance, whatever it is, in hadith is mentioned, even if a nettle pricks you, even for that you will be rewarded. Even for that you will be rewarded. So if you are going through a very difficult period of life, imagine how much reward you will get. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes mention that إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرُهُم بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give the reward of sabr by Himself. And He is fixed it. يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ, which is بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. There is no number, there is no limit to it. And thirdly, whenever we fall into some difficulty, it's either to erase sins in our life, or it's either to increase our status in Jannah. So whenever we as believers have this in mind, then we should never become depressed. Sometimes we come in a difficult situation, and people start becoming depressed. They take on their minds. Okay, what's happening? My life is not working. The job is not going for me. I can't get married or job. Why should we get depressed? Because we've got light at the end of the tunnel. We've got something to look for. We've got something to look forward to. We're getting rewarded for every second that we go through. And some ulama say that كُلُّ بَلَاءٍ يُقَرِّبُكَ إِلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ نِعْمَةٌ. Every difficulty that gets you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You fell in a difficulty, and that difficulty made you come to a masjid. That difficulty made you stop praying the Quran. That difficulty taught you to lift your hands and cry to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then this in reality is not a difficulty, it's not a test. In reality it's a ni'mat. وَكُلُّ بَلَاءٍ يُبَعِدُكَ لِلَّهِ فَهُوَ نِقْمَةٌ. And every test that takes you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that in reality is a punishment. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed you with wealth, that's a ni'mat. But it's a test at the same time. And you stop coming to namaz. You're so busy in your business now. In reality, is that a ni'mat for you? It's a ni'mah. That's a punishment. You got married. If that marriage was a means of ni'mat for you, you carry on in your dini life. But as soon as you got married, you change. You become a different person. Namaz is no longer there. It's just what? Enjoying your life. And that shows that this is not a ni'mat for you. So as believers, we should always have hopes in the hereafter. Have hopes, even if you're in a difficult position. Number one, if you have this in mind, that's why a believer, what Rasul mentioned, that a believer is in every instance is in a win-win case. You can never lose. You're always in a win-win case. Whether you are in a difficulty, you do sabr, you won. Whether you're in good time and you do shukr, you've won. There's always a win-win case for a believer. So anyway, Yusuf was salam. Now his days of difficulty are coming to an end. So to start the days of happiness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows the king of the time a dream. His name was Rayyan bin Walid. So before we mentioned about the chief minister. So above the chief minister was the king. This was the king. And under him was the minister, the prime minister, the chief minister, whatever you want to call him. So he was Zuleika's husband. And this is another person. He was named Rayyan bin Walid, who was a king. So one day he went to sleep. And whilst he went to sleep, he saw a dream. He saw a dream that 7 fat cows come out and they are being eaten by 7 thin cows. Yet when the 7 thin cows eat the fat cows, they don't increase in weight. They still stay thin. Then he sees 7 ears, 7 horns of ear wheat. The Quran doesn't mention what kind of a crop it is, because there are different types of crops. And there are some crops, rice, barley, wheat, corn, all these things, cereal, they grow in ears. Ears means they have a spike. And in each spike there are 10, 15 pockets, and in each of them there are grains. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a ajib nizam, that these things, as long as they remain in the pocket, as long as they remain in the ear, then these grains will not go moldy. They will not get fungus. They will not get bacteria. They will not be eaten by animals, by bugs, by insects. To preserve them. So he sees that there are 7 ears of corn, and they are fresh. But then a different other ear corns come, and they go over them, and they basically them either disappear or they take over, they over control them, overpower the fresh ones. So the king woke up and he was a bit astonished, and at the same time he was a bit anxious. Okay, what's going on? What's this dream that I'm seeing? He's puzzled. So he called his ministers, and Ya'ul Malau, he called them all to the palace. Aftuni, give me a meaning, give me an insight to what I have seen in Kuntum li Ruya Ta'burun, if you can seriously interpret dreams. So they came, and the king started to, they all gathered, and the king started to narrate his dream, that last night I saw this thing happening. After listening, they all pondered, and they thought, what's going on? But nothing was making sense to them. 7 cows being eaten by 7 thin cows, yet they don't put any weight on, etc. So they lacked in answering. They could not give a proper answer. So after a bit of pondering, they turned and said, Qal was Ghath wa Ahlam. They were unable to understand the meaning of the dream, so they replied, Qal was Ghath wa Ahlam. These are only confused dreams. They are nightmares. They are confused dreams. So sometimes what happens is, when you have a day, a difficult day, a day filled with stress, and usually when you go to sleep, the same thing starts to reappear in your mind. Or you're living in an environment, you've gone Jamaat, you've gone Madrasa, and the whole day you're praying, and you see yourself in namaz, you might see yourself in sajda, you might see yourself. So this is depending on the environment you are in, depending on your mindset, it has impact. So because they did not understand the dream, they said that it's just a muddle of a dream. It's just something that you've seen. Don't worry about it. Qal wal Ghath wa Ahlam. These are only confused dreams, nightmares. وَمَا نَحْنُ بِتَعْوِيلِ أَحْلَامِ بِعَالِمِينَ. And then they further went to say, وَمَا نَحْنُ بِتَعْوِيلِ أَحْلَامِ. And we have no knowledge concerning the interpretations of dreams, of the confused dreams. Meaning, if it's a proper dream, then we'll be able to interpret it. But this is not a proper dream. It's just thoughts and doubts, and everything is mismatched in your head, and everything's muddled up and jumbled up. So we can't really interpret this. If it was a real dream, we would have interpreted. So anyway, because they didn't have sufficient knowledge, now they're next to the king, the king's courtiers, the king's ministers, they're the king's right-hand man advisors. So they have to show something. So they said, Al-Ghath wa Ahlam, that this is confused dreams. So to camouflage their lack of knowledge, to camouflage their inability to interpret dreams, they thought, let's just tell the king things are muddled up, don't worry about it. And then they went on to say, وَمَا نَحْنُ بِتَعْوِيلِ أَحْلَامِ بِعَالِمِينَ. And we are not, we don't have the skills to interpret such dreams. Meaning we are ministers, we are advisors. You ask us regarding how to run the country. You ask us guidance on certain rules and laws, we will guide you. This is not our job. We don't know how to interpret dreams. So to camouflage their inability and to camouflage their being unskilled in this, they came out with this. Yet the king was still not satisfied. He was still confused. He was anxious. So you can imagine that he must have been the talk of the palace for some days. Under this, as the Mullah Shabi Tanwi says, that they gave two answers. The first was the one said, Qal wal Ghat wa Halam. And he said the reason they said this was to just dispel the thoughts and to get rid of the doubts from the king's mind and to give him some comfort. Okay, don't worry about it. It's nothing major. You shouldn't be losing sleep over it. It's just standard. It's a dream you thought and just forget it. And then the second thing was when they said, وَمَا نَحْنُ بِتَأْوِيلِ أَحْلَامِ بِعَالِمِينَ, that was just to cover up that we need to stay by you and this is not our job. Our job is something else. And usually sometimes you see this, that sometimes a person is close to some esteemed person or people are close to him and he needs some help. But they will try to keep it within the circle so that outsiders don't come in. Maybe this esteemed person, this king, this minister, this rich person might get an inclination towards him if a clever person comes. So to keep their bond, to keep their circle, what do? They try to dispel the thoughts. Okay, don't worry about it. Forget it. It's nothing to be worried about. Meaning don't try to get help from outside. Okay, if somebody comes and gives the correct interpretation, there's a chance that the king will get inclined towards him. So anyway, the king was not satisfied and he must have called fortune tellers from all over the country, and the minister might have said certain person might know, certain person might know, and they came and nothing was making sense to a king and he was still puzzled. So anyway, whilst all this was going on, the person who was a cupbearer, he must have been witnessing this. So one day he said, وَقَالَ الَّذِي نَجَى مِنْهُمَا وَقَالَ الَّذِي, and the one that was released. Naja minhuma, naja released. Minhuma from the two convicts. One was killed, one was released. He was, whilst he was serving the drink or whatever he was doing, naja waddakar, he remembered. Waddakar ba'da ummatin, he remembered after a lengthy period. We're talking 7 years. After 7 years, he remembered that, wait a minute, the issue, the problem that's over here is regarding a dream. And who can better give an interpretation than Yusuf? I know a person who's in jail, who's a saint, who knows about interpretation. So he remembered after a long period of time. So he said, I will inform you. I will inform you regarding its interpretation. So send me. Meaning, I know who will be able to sort this out for you. I know who will be able to make you understand and give you a proper interpretation. And that is a person that I was with in jail and I personally experienced it. I had a dream and he must have said to a king, I experienced the dream and it became true, and the other person also had a dream and that also became true, and he's a very truthful person, he's a saintly person, he's got very high morals, etc. So he said, فَأَرْسِلُونَ, send me. Meaning send me to a prison, because a prison, you can't just walk into a prison. So make arrangements for me, get the protocols and make some ways so I can go to a jail, and I will ask him and I will make sure that you get your answer. So the king must have made arrangements, the protocols must have been done, he must have been taken, or he must have been given entry to a jail, and he went in. So as soon as he went in, Yusuf or Siddiq, he went in and he saw Yusuf. So the first thing he said was, Yusuf or Siddiq. As soon as he arrived, he said, oh Yusuf, are you Siddiq? Oh, the truthful one. Aftina bi sabi bakrat. Aftina fi sabi bakrat. Inform us regarding 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 thin cows. وَسَبِ سُنْبُلَاتٍ خُضْرٍ وَخَيَابِسَاتٍ, and 7 green ears of corn and others that are dry. لَأَلِّي أَرْجِعُ, so that I can return to the people. So that they may be enlightened. So as soon as he enters the jail, he addresses Yusuf with the word Ayyuha Siddiq. Ayyuha Siddiq meaning, oh Yusuf, the embodiment of truth. Nothing escapes your tongue but it's truth. And this is the Nabi, that you don't say anything but the truth. So I have come to you, and I have come to you for a specific reason. And the reason is that the king has seen a dream and must have related the whole story. So aftuni, so give us the answer to this interpretation. Why? So I can go back to the people, so that لَعَلُّمْ يَعْلَمُونَ, so they know, either they know regarding the dream, or that they know how expert you are, and they understand regarding your expertise and excellence. So he goes and he says the dream, and Yusuf ﷺ then goes on to explain the whole dream. Inshallah, we'll carry with that. the next week. But the one point I would like to mention on this is, as soon as he came in the jail and he narrated Yusuf alayhi salam, Yusuf alayhi salam did not mention anything regarding where have you been? It's been 7 years. Do you remember the message I told you? No reprimand, no rebuke. He did not rebuke him or reprimand him or anything. And this shows that the caliber and the sublime conduct and the manners of a Nabi. That how so forbearing they are. That I told you to do something, you didn't do it, and now you want me to give interpretation? Wait a minute. I will only give you interpretation until you go to a king and you secure my release. Or I will only give you interpretation if this happens. No, nothing. Shaykh Yusuf turned and started to give you interpretation, and he did not remind him anything of the past. And this is a great ni'mat and a great characteristic, which is called hilm, forbearance, and being very wise and humble. This is a characteristic that we should also endeavor to try to get into our lives. That if somebody does something to us, and at a time of need they come to us, or we've tried to do him a favor, and he didn't fulfill their favor. But when he comes to us, what do we usually do? Even though we can help them, we will put them aside. Oh, wait a minute. When I need help, you weren't there. When I told you to do this, we didn't do it for you, and now you want me to do it for you. That is not the caliber, and that's not the characteristic of the Anbiya. In fact, we should be such that if they do it for us, subhanAllah. If they don't do it for us and they need help, we should try our best to help them. Anfa'un nas, khayrun nas. Khayrun nas, anfa'un nas. Some said, that the best amongst you are the ones that are the most beneficial, the ones that impart the most benefit to the other brothers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept what's been said. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the correct understanding. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah wa bihamdihi.